What's going on, casters? Dylan from Pandito Gaming here, and today we're going to cover what kinds of prices you should be looking for when trying to buy Elestrals cards. Now, this content's primarily geared towards resellers and investors, but players and collectors could also use this kind of information to help them make purchasing decisions and figuring out are they getting a good deal for the cards that they're looking for. We're mostly geared towards higher end cards here, but we have a lot of principles that help learn about how to price pretty much any card. Now, before we get into things, remember, as always, this is not financial advice. I'm just sharing my experiences and perspectives with you that have helped guide me as I've made over $40,000 worth of sales and gained over $20,000 worth of value in my collection in Elestrals so far. So, without any further ado, let's jump into it. Now, before we go too far, I want to make sure that I caveat this up front. Pricing cards is very difficult. You have to have experience, you have to see how cards change over time. And there's some factors in this that are just completely out of your control. There are some things that to know how to price a card, you have to know information, like print runs, like how good a card is going to be in the current playability format. There's lots of things that can come into play when pricing cards that you may not know or may find out well after you've made a purchasing decision. So it's important to realize you're not always going to make the best choices, but you can take the information that you do have and make the best choices based on that. There's a few general principles that I try to follow when I'm investing in Indie TCGs, especially in Elestrals. These will definitely evolve over time. This is one of the first videos on my channel, so I don't have a clear, precise list of everything, but these are four things that I definitely thought of when I was asking myself this question, and we'll run through these real quick now. So, in general, playability is a big factor when it comes to small TCGs. The more playable a card is, the more it will be worth. This is to the point where cards that have been reprinted 10, 15 times and have been in multiple different sets with multiple variations will still sell consistently, even as a common, for 50 cents, a dollar, $2 sometimes even. So playability is a really big factor when pricing things. Because my time horizons are generally in the 1 year plus long hold terms, I will tend to avoid playable cards because playability long term is very tumultuous. Cards can be banned, cards can fall out of meta, people can build strategies that will nullify specific cards, and in general, price can dramatically fluctuate based on how playable the cards are. So, investing in cards, looking for things that have value outside of that, tend to be in my personal wheelhouse. But there is something to be said about short-term flipping or getting cards in bulk and turning them around by piecing them out in the playable aspect. That's just something I tend to avoid personally. At the end of the day, markets always are ruled by supply and demand. The more of a card that's out there, the less the price will be. The more people want the card, the higher the price will be. And how you decide, how it is determined whether a card is appealing and people want it or not, we'll talk about in a little bit. But in general, if you see that there's only one or two listings for a card and then it just disappears off of the face of TCG player, that card will naturally start to go up. Early on in the life cycle of a set when it's first released, there are significantly fewer copies out in the wild, and there are more people who don't have cards yet who are looking for them. So early release prices are normally significantly higher than after a couple months, but that fluctuates over time. A great rule that I actually learned from Dan over on Catch 'em All Collectibles, he's a Pokemon seller. He said a phrase which I've taken to heart a lot in my investments, which is don't go broke on good deals. Just because something is a good deal and you see something that you could sell for 50, $60 and somebody selling it for 40, 45, that doesn't mean you should spend all of your money anytime you see those kinds of deals. Looking for those great deals, the things that are really valuable, where somebody's trying to sell 5 or 10 stellars all at once, and you can buy them at a 40, 50% discount and then piece them out. If you spend all your time buying deals that are 20 or 30% off, you're going to miss the opportunities where they're even better than that. And last of all, and probably one of the most important parts here, everyone's going to invest or look to resell differently. Know what your timelines are, know what the cards are that meet those. What are the things that you can sell quickly if you're looking to sell quickly? What are the things that people are willing to get rid of that you can hold on to longer that you know other people are going to want in a year, 2 years from now? Know your timelines, go into your purchase decisions knowing whether or not they fit the strategy you're trying to push. So, what actually affects the value of cards? How do you know whether a card is going to be expensive or cheap? Um, as I mentioned before, one of the biggest factors is how big the supply is. The rarity of cards generally tends to dictate a lot about the value of cards. Galaxy, Champion of Poseidon, is on the screen because this was a promo card that originally was not released in enough volume as much as Elestrals wanted it to be. It was very hard to find. It was a store promo that only some stores got. And you can see over here the TCG player chart on the right. When they released it, you can see there wasn't enough supply. Um, while you'll see that there's not a ton of sales on TCG Player during the first few months, this was selling consistently on the marketplace and through other platforms at 40, 50, $60 per card. And around the April, May timeframe, they released more of these cards. The supply went up and the demand did not significantly change, so the price went down a lot. It went from consistently selling from $40 all the way down to being nearly impossible to sell for that $10 to $15 range. And a big reason why this card was so popular was because the playability of the card. And because the card was expensive because of its playability, once there was enough supply to meet demand, there weren't collectors actively looking for it, so the price dropped. Another big piece of this, like I mentioned, it feeds into the rarity piece a little bit, is time since release. Now, time since release will destroy prices early, and they tend to help fix the prices later. What I mean by that is the first month of release, you have people looking for cards because they don't have them yet. You have people who have not opened their boxes yet, people who are essentially looking to fill a collection or get a deck put together, and not enough people have opened their packs yet to have collected enough of those to want to be selling. So early on, card prices are normally higher. As the set ages, as people open more, as more stores get hold of the product and boxes become cheaper, more people open, the cards become much more plentiful, and prices tend to go down. Now, over time, assuming the hobby continues to expand, more people come into Elestrals, more collectors show up, or as playability wanes or increases over time, you'll see that the cards will go up in price over time because less and less of those copies are in hands of people who want them, and there are fewer copies out there, duplicates, triplicates, extras that people are looking to sell, especially for shorter printed sets or for specialty sets like Shattered Stars. There's only so many out there, and eventually the people who want them have them and don't want to get rid of them, and new people come in who want them, and prices will start going up. As I already mentioned, a lot of times playability is a huge factor. The more playable a card is, the more valuable it would be. If a playable card, which is expensive, becomes not playable at some point for some reason, the prices generally tend to drop for that. The last two pieces are generally how popular is the Elestral? What is the art on the card? Does it look particularly good? Is it unique? You know, stained glass, full arts, pottery arts. Those are all very unique and really cool things that people will tend to want to collect over other things, especially for cards that have multiple printings, especially the spirits, for example. People want to find those eclectic, unique arts that just feel different from the other ones because it helps them stand out. It exemplifies their style. There's lots of reasons why people can like different Elestrals or different arts, but those have a significant impact on value as well. Now, let's talk about what actual prices for cards should be. Now, as I go through these, something to keep in mind is these are target sales prices. If you have a card, I would tell you this is the range you should generally sell it in. If you are someone who's a reseller or an investor, you should be looking for prices below this if you can, right? You don't want to buy something for $300 if you can only sell it for $300. I'll give some examples in a future video of where you can get good deals, how you find that. A lot of that has to do with like buying in bulk or finding people who are just desperate to sell or who pulled many copies of the same thing and they're just looking to get out of a card for another one. Finding trades, especially if you have a lower value stellar. Sometimes people will just trade them straight up for a more expensive stellar because they don't really care as much about the prices. There's lots of ways to get around that, but in my experience, these are normally the target values for each of the cards that we're going to look at. So X out of 99 stellars, there's only 99 copies of these. They are very limited. Each set has a set number of stellars, of serialized stellars. The more serialized stellars in a set, the more likely it is that the prices could be convoluted, that people would be willing to pay less just because there's so many of them and there's so many people in the market who have money to spend. But generally speaking, if you're looking at a serialized stellar during the release month, it's probably going to sell somewhere between $250 and $400. There are cases where you could find stellars that will sell for less than that, especially if it's one that nobody really cares about or is new, doesn't have a unique design, and it's also not playable. I have seen stellars sell for more than this during their release week. And when I say the phrase release month, in general, that can be hard to measure because some sets will be actually pre-released at events or conventions. Sometimes creators will get packages that have these packs ahead of time, and they could actually put things on the market early. It just kind of depends. I say release month because it's usually at least a few weeks. It just kind of depends on how the release rollout works. It can vary. The next 6 to 12 months, so about a year, that's usually when you get all of the people opening packs who will pull a stellar that they really don't care about. Most people will not hold on to a $100, $200 card that they have no emotional attachment to or aren't trying to play it in a deck or, some reason to keep it. Most people won't just take any stellar that you hand them and just hold on to it when they could be getting 200, 250, even just $100. And you have people, who will run into points in their lives and something's going wrong, something bad happened, and they need to make money right now. You can find stellars less than this. There are some playable stellars that'll end up more than this. It just kind of depends. In general, long term, and you can especially see this with the Kickstarter stellars. I would probably target $300 to $500 each for those. Some stellars that you get from Kickstarter, if you offered them less than $400, people would just laugh at that. If you tried to get a Necruff or an Equilynx for under $400 from Kickstarter, no one would really hear you out for the most part. Now, I'm sure you could find a stellar or two from the Kickstarter where you could find it for 200 or 250 at this point. But I think after 2, 3, 4 years, pretty much every stellar in a set, assuming that the hobby keeps on increasing and we keep getting more people in, you'll probably see all of those push the 300 plus range because most people who have the cards aren't looking to move them just a year or two after they get them. It can depend. And I know there are people out there who say like, hey, well, Elestrals will get new stellars over time. And while there's only one Necruff stellar today, what if the next set has an X out of 99 Necruff? Won't that make it more likely for those earlier Necruff cards to sell for a lot less? And while that's possible, I agree that's true. A lot of collectors would rather just have the both copies of it. When you get into real true collecting, you're not just looking for one copy of something. Now, especially with playable cards where they only need 3 copies or the text changes over time or things like that, I definitely understand that. But when we're thinking long-term horizons, if you're expecting playability of cards or uniqueness of cards to hold up the value, you're probably not going to be happy with the long-term play on that. Moving on to X out of 10 Stellars. These obviously significantly rarer. They're obviously about 10 times more rare than an X out of 99. They come in Shattered Stars in baseline sets. It is very volatile how much you can get for these. And a lot of times it just depends on who's looking at the time you're trying to sell. If you find somebody or a couple people who are really interested in a card, an X of 10 could easily push to the $2,000, $2,500, $3,000 range, especially early in Elestrals and for specific Elestrals. I know Trifernal, Lockagon, Penterror, a lot of them can go for way more because they just have stories or they're more popular. It just kind of depends. For just a general X out of 10 that there's not a huge attachment to, you should never sell them for less than $800, in my opinion. I'm very confident that if you spent, 3 months, 6 months, a year waiting to sell, you will find somebody willing to buy your X of 10 for that price. That feels very low, and I have seen them sell for less than that. I would personally never do that. But yeah, X of 10s, significantly harder to find, significantly fewer of them. They cost way more, but you get one person who wants three of them, and that's a third of the whole market right there. It can be really hard to find a seller for a card, which can drive the price up. And half of these often aren't even found in a lot of sets. Now, reverse stellars are much harder to price. A large part of that is because the rarity of them is significantly harder to tell than serialized cards. Obviously, with serialized cards, you know exactly how many of them there are, and you can base your judgment off of that. For reverse stellars, those can be wildly different depending on the set, the print run, um, how they structure and segment it. It can be really hard to track. In general, if you have a popular or playable Elestral in a reverse form, it will go for $60 to $100. The Snow Bears in general, for a very long time, sold between $60 and $100. I know there's been some recent sales way lower than that because the BOGO Frostfall sale got a whole bunch of people who didn't want them to go in open packs and just sell them for whatever they could get. But in general, any card that is playable that gets a reverse is probably going to sell for $60 to $100 consistently. And some of the more popular ones will also sell in that higher range. Now, Shattered Stars reverse stellars are probably the most interesting case. From my pull rate data, I can tell you reverse stellars are roughly 3 to 4 times more common than a serialized stellar. That is to say, you will get 3 or 4 reverse stellars on average per X out of 99 in Shattered Stars. So mathematically, you can say, I feel pretty confident in saying there's somewhere between 300 and 500 copies of each reverse stellar in Shattered Stars. Because of that, I feel very confident in saying there are less reverse stellars that came out of Shattered Stars per individual card. There's less copies than mainline sets. Because of that, mainline sets tend to sell for less. Again, reverse stellars are something that are very tumultuous when it comes to pricing. You can find copies of reverse stellars for $10, $15, $20 if you look for somebody who just wants to get rid of them. Especially for Shattered Stars, you get people who will open hundreds of bundles chasing the serialized, the X out of 99 cards, and they'll just be sitting with a stack of 10, 20 of the same reverse stellar, and they'll be willing to sell it for less. But generally speaking, once the market flushes out, Shattered Stars is going to be much harder to find than a lot of the other ones, so they tend to have higher prices than the baseline sets. Now, Mainline set full arts. We're not going to talk about Shattered Stars full arts because those are completely different, but mainline set full arts are probably even more dynamic than reverse stellars are. Again, you don't know how many are printed unless you understand the print runs and the pull rates, so they can be really hard to measure, and they have dramatically changed those from set to set. In the original first edition, we had situations where Frostfall had basically a full art in every starter deck. Every cryo scorch starter deck pretty much had a full art in it, and that kind of flooded the market for that set. Not to mention, it was the most printed set ever. But even looking at Moonrise and future sets like Daybreak, those also had a ton of full arts. You were basically guaranteed one full art in every 36 packs. In future sets, the Divine Champion block, you're actually potentially able to get more than one full art per box. But something that's very important, they did not duplicate box toppers for the full arts in the set starting in Sunstrike. So some of the prices here really depend on set. In general, for a brand new set that's come out during its release month, again, that's flexible, you'll get about $50 to $80 for most full arts. There will be a handful of full arts that have no chance of playability, and no one knows or likes the Elestral that much that'll sell for closer to 30 or 40. But in general, prices are heavily inflated for full arts for the first month or so of release. For highly playable cards, even after release, you'll get anywhere between 40 and 75. There are cards that come from Daybreak and Moonrise that still sell for this price because they are extremely useful cards that can be used in blinged out decks, and they can be pretty hard to find at time. In general, though, because of how printing has been handled for most of these sets and how pull rates have worked, most sets will sell for $10 to $30 for their full arts. Obviously, Kickstarter is a huge exception to this. Even some of the base set cards will sell a little bit higher than this. And I do think it'll be really interesting to see how Sunstrike evolves over time, because they stopped printing box toppers that matched cards that already had full arts. I do think there's a chance that some cards break that $30 barrier and maybe stick around higher. The Penterror from Sunstrike has some potential behind it. But in general, this is kind of the prices for most of the sets so far. Long term, I see, a few years from now, it would be hard for me to imagine that most of these full arts would be under $20. Where right now you can find almost all of the Frostfall full arts for under $20. I think that'll be the floor in a few years once the boxes are finally worked through. That's a long time from now. I am not currently investing in those cards because I don't want to wait that long. I think there's better plays, but I do think full arts will start rising in value, especially with these textured full art cards and some cooler things. Once we get into, more story filled cards, I think that could be helpful too. So, closing notes for this video. The most important part about buying is to make sure you understand your strategy up front and make sure you're buying cards that fit your strategy. If you're looking for short-term flips or, to buy in bulk and sell right away, target the cards that are liquid, that can sell really quickly, that people buy out all the time. If you're buying packs or boxes at wholesale costs so that you can open and sell, make sure you're buying at the cheapest value that you can and trying to sell those cards as quickly as you can to take advantage of that release month value bump. You should prefer to target specific cards. Don't just buy anything that's out there. Try to figure out what you think is worth buying, what you think will give you the right return. Yes, you can buy things just because they're insanely cheap and you can make money from it, but they might take longer to sell. But it's better to target specific things that you think are really good value. Find the right buying price for what your sales target is. So, never buy anything unless you can at least make 20% minus fees. If you buy something 10% under the current sale price, unless it goes up, you have to pay fees for shipping, for marketplace fees, whatever. Um, make sure you know that you're actually going to make money from the thing that you're buying if you're not looking to keep it long term. Look for bulk deals and other ways to get cards cheaper. People will try to sell whole collections or multiple stellars all at once, and will give you significant discounts for that. Take advantage of that when you can. But again, make sure you're not taking something that's dead weight that you can't move as part of that. Make sure that it's worth it in the long term. And above all, when investing in Elestrals or any other indie TCG, realize you're not going to run a store just selling off of one TCG. You're going to have to do more than just that. This isn't something that's going to pay for your entire lifestyle. This is something that you're doing to help supplement your income, help pay for your hobby, something that you should be doing because you enjoy it. It is a nice benefit to you enjoying the card game that you're selling stuff in. Don't take it too seriously. Don't get upset if people are mad at your prices or won't sell you something for a certain price. Have fun. At the end of the day, that's what investing in TCGs really does. So that's all I got for you today. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and we're out.